Good morning, old sport. You're having lunch with me today, and I thought we'd ride up together. It's pretty, isn't it, old sport? Haven't you seen it before?
I'd seen it. Everyone had seen it.
So how's your day been?
Long enough.
Look here, old sport. What's your opinion on me anyhow?
Bit overwhelming.
Well, I'm going to tell you about my life. I don't want you to get the wrong idea from all those stories you hear. I'll tell you God's truth. I am the son of some wealthy people in the Middle West, all dead. Now I grew up in America, educated at Oxford. I've been trying to forget the sad thing that happened a long time ago. Then came the war, old sport. I was a lieutenant when it began. We stayed in Montenegro. Mr. Caraway, this is my friend, Mr. Wolfsheim.
So I took one look at him, and what do you think I did?
What?
I handed the money to Capsaw, and I said to him, "Don't you give him a penny until he shuts his mouth." And then and there, he shut it.
Highballs?
This is a nice restaurant here, but I like the one across the street better.
Yes, highballs. It's too hot over there.
Hot and small, yes, but full of memories.
What place is that?
The old Metropole.
The old Metropole, filled with faces dead and gone, filled with friends gone now and forever. I can't forget so long as I live the night they shot Rosie Rosenthal there. It was 6 of us, all at a table, and Rosie had eat and drunk a lot all evening. When it was almost morning, the waiter came up to him with a funny look and says somebody wants to speak to him outside. "All right," says Rosie, and begins to get up and pulled him down in his chair. "Let the bastards come in here if they want you, Rosie, but don't, so help me, move out of this room." It was 4 o'clock in the morning then, and if we'd have raised the blinds, we'd have seen daylight.
Did he go?
Sure he went. He turned around in the door and said, "Don't let that waiter take away my coffee." Then he went out on the sidewalk and they shot him there 3 times in his full belly and drove away.
4 of them were electrocuted?
5 with Becker. I understand you're looking for a business negotiation.
Oh no, this isn't the man.
No?
This is just a friend. I told you we'd talk about that some other time.
I beg your pardon. I got the wrong man.
Look here, old sport. I'm afraid I've made you a little angry in the car this morning.
What annoys me is that you have to tell me through Miss Baker.
Oh, it's nothing under here. Miss Baker's a great sportswoman, you know? And she would never do anything that wasn't alright. Oof.
Goodbye, Mr. Gatsby.
He has a telephone call. Fine fellow, isn't he? Handsome looking man.
Indeed.
He's an Oxford man, you know. He went to Oxford College in England. You know where Oxford is?
I know it.
It's one of the most famous colleges in the world.
Have you known Gatsby for a long time?
Several years. I made the pleasure of his acquaintance just after the war, but I knew I had discovered a man of fine breeding after I talked with him an hour. I said to myself, "Here's the kind of man you'd like to take home and introduce your mother and sister to." Fine specimen human molars.
Well, that's a very interesting idea.
Yeah. Gatsby's very careful about women. He would never so much as look at a friend's wife. I have enjoyed my lunch, and I'm going to run off from you 2 young men before I outstay my welcome.
Don't hurry, Mayor.
You're very polite, but I belong to another generation. You sit here and discuss your sports and your young ladies and your... As for me, I am 50 years old, and I won't impose myself on you any longer. Good day, you fine young men.
He becomes very sentimental sometimes. This is one of his sentimental days. He's quite a character around New York, a denizen of Broadway.
Who is he anyhow? An actor?
No.
A dentist?
Mayor Wolfsheim? No, he's a gambler. He's the man who fixed the World Series back in 1919.
Fix the World Series? How did he happen to do that?
He just saw the opportunity.
Why isn't he in jail?
They can't get him, old sport. He's a smart man.
Come along with me for a minute. I've got to say hello to someone.
Where have you been? Daisy's been furious.
This is Mr. Gatsby, Mr. Buchanan.
Pleasure.
How have you been, anyway? How did you come this far out, anyway?
I've been having lunch with Mr. Gatsby.
One October day in 1917, I was walking along from one place to another, half on the sidewalks and half on the lawns. I had on a new plaid skirt, blew a little in the wind, and whenever this happened, the banners in front of all the houses stretched off stiff. The largest of the banners in the largest of the lawns belonged to Daisy Faye's house. She was just 18, 2 years older than me, and by far the most popular of all the young girls in Louisville. She dressed in white and had a little white roadster, and all day long the telephone rang in her house and excited young officers from Camp Taylor demanded the privilege of monopolizing her that night. When I came opposite her house that morning, her white roadster was beside the curb and she was sitting in it with a lieutenant I had never seen before. They were so engrossed in each other that she didn't see until I was 5 feet away. "Hello, Jordan," she called unexpectedly. "Please come here." I was flattered that she wanted to speak to me because of all the older girls I admired her most. She asked me if I was going to the Red Cross and make bandages. I was. Well then, would I tell them that she could come that day? The officer looked at Daisy while she was speaking in a way that every young girl wants to be looked at sometime. And because it seems romantic to me, I have remembered the innocent day since. His name was Jay Gatsby, and I didn't lay eyes on him again for over 4 years. I began to play in tournaments, so I didn't see Daisy very often. She went with a slightly older crowd, when she went with anyone at all. Her mother had found her packing her bag one winter night to go to New York and say goodbye to a soldier who was going overseas. She was effectively prevented, but she wasn't on speaking terms with her family for several weeks. After that, she didn't play around with the soldiers anymore, but only with a few flat-footed, short-sighted young men in town who couldn't get into the army at all. By the next autumn, she was gay again, gay as ever. She had a debut after the armistice, and in February she was presumably engaged to a man from New Orleans. In June she was married to Tom Buchanan of Chicago, with more pomp and circumstances than Louisville ever knew before. He came down with 100 people in 4 private cars and hired a whole floor of the Seal Batch Hotel. And the day before the wedding, he gave her a string of pearls valued at $350,000. I was a bridesmaid. I came into her room half an hour before the bridal dinner and found her lying on her bed as lovely as the June night in her flowered dress, and as drunk as a monkey. She had a bottle of Centenaire in one hand and a letter in the other. "Congratulate me," she muttered. "Never had a drink before, but oh, how I do enjoy it. What's the matter, Daisy?" I was scared, I can tell you. I'd never seen a girl like that before. "Here, dears." She groped around in a waste basket she had with her in the bed and pulled out a string of pearls. "Take 'em downstairs and give 'em back to whoever they belong to. Tell 'em all Daisy's changed her mind. Say, Daisy's changed her mind." She began to cry. She cried and cried. I rushed out and found her mother's maid, and we locked the door and got her into a cold bath. She wouldn't let go of the letter. She took it into the tub with her and squeezed it up into a wet ball, and only let me leave it in the soap dish. When she saw that it was coming to pieces like snow, she didn't say another word. We gave her spirits and put ices on her forehead and hooked her back into her dress, and half an hour later, when we walked out of the room, the pearls were around her neck and the incident was over. Next day at 5 o'clock she married Tom Buchanan without so much as a shiver, and started off on the 3 months trip to the South Seas. I saw them in Santa Barbara when they came back, and I thought I'd never seen a girl so mad about her husband. If he left the room for a minute, she'd look around uneasy and say, "Where's Tom gone?" and wear the most abstracted expression until she saw him coming in the door. She used to sit on the stand with her head in her lap by the hour, rubbing her fingers over her eyes and looking at him with unfathomable delight. It was touching to see them together. It made you laugh in a hushed, fascinated way. That was in August. A week after I left Santa Barbara, Tom ran into a wagon on the Ventura Road one night and ripped the front wheel off his car. The girl who was with him got into the papers, too, because her arm was broken. She was one of the chambermaids in the Santa Barbara hotel. The next April, Daisy had her little girl and they went to France for a year. I saw them one spring in Cannes and later in Deauville. Then they came back to Chicago to settle down. Daisy was popular in Chicago, as you know. They moved with a fast crowd, all of them young and rich and wild, but she came out with an absolute perfect reputation, perhaps because she doesn't drink. It's a great advantage not to drink among hard-drinking people. You can hold your tongue and, moreover, you can time any little irregular of your own, so that everybody else is so blind that they don't see or care. Well, about 6 weeks ago, she heard the name Gatsby for the first time in years. It was when I asked you, do you remember, if you knew Gatsby in West Wing. After you had gone home, she came into my room and woke me up and said, "What Gatsby?" And when I described him, I was half asleep. She said in the strangest voice that it must be the man she used to know. It wasn't until then that I connected this Gatsby with the officer in her white car.
It was a strange coincidence.
But it wasn't a coincidence at all.
Why not?
Gatsby bought that house so Daisy would be just across the bay.
Did I have to know all this before we could ask such a little thing?
He's afraid he's waited too long. He thought you might be offended. You see, he's a regular tough underneath it all.
Why didn't he ask you to arrange the meeting?
He wants her to see his house.
Oh.
I think he half expected her to wander into one of his parties some night, but she never did. Then he began asking people casually if they knew her, and I was the first one he found. It was that night he sent me for his dance, and you should have heard the elaborate way he worked up to it. Of course, I immediately suggested a luncheon in New York, and I thought he might go mad.
Does she want to see Gatsby?
Does she not want to go about it? Gatsby doesn't want her to know. You're just supposed to invite her to tea.